In this 25th anniversary year of September 11th, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation continues to honor America's heroes. Heroes like Fire Lieutenant Michael Wells, who was inspired by 9/11 to serve his community. After 14 dedicated years of service, he lost his battle with occupational cancer, leaving behind his wife, Katie, and their 3 children. Tunnel to Towers honored Lieutenant Wells by paying off the family's mortgage in recognition of his sacrifices. Donate $11 monthly and amplify your impact with a car or land donation. Go to T2T.
King Charles was down at the 9/11 memorial, and it's exactly why I wanted the guest that we have live right now. We have heard a lot already throughout the country as it relates to the race for New York governor. But guess who was also up for re-election this year? President Trump's nemesis. And that is the Democrat Attorney General, Letitia James, who also sued Trump's business empire. And in this race, not just token opposition, Republicans have found a serious candidate with an enormous background to match. It's going to be very, very interesting. Her name is Saritha Komatireddy, and she is a respected former prosecutor, national security expert, and a public servant with a career devoted to upholding the rule of law and protecting Americans. And she's joining me live right now, and she's going to be taking your telephone calls for the first half of the show at 800-848-9222. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that you had a news conference in Albany today as it relates to transit crime, and I'll circle back to that. But thank you so much for appearing.
Thank you, Dom, and it's great to be with you.
Okay, so you've got some serious credentials, okay? And so is it fair to say that 9/11, King Charles today, and I'm going to get to what happened Saturday with the president and so on. I want your opinion on a number of issues. But is it fair to say that 9/11, right, the king down there earlier today, 9/11 changed your mission in life, and why?
It is. I remember that day like so many others in my generation remember that day. For me, it was my first week of college. And I sat there. Initially, I had gone to college thinking I would become a doctor, like my parents. And 9/11 happened, and it broke my heart. And I felt strongly that I needed to do something to fight terrorism. And that is what led me to law school. I wanted to be a terrorism prosecutor, and I got to do exactly that. I came to New York. I was a federal prosecutor in Brooklyn, and I focused on prosecuting leaders in Al-Qaeda and in ISIS. And then I took over the narcotics unit and prosecuted leaders in the Sinaloa cartel and other Mexican drug cartels. And then I became chief of staff of the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. So I spent my career going after terrorists and narco-terrorists.
Wow. I was looking at your resume a bit earlier today. You are no joke, and you have to know that Letitia James is going to take you very, very seriously. You are aware of that, correct?
She should. Everyone should.
What's this race going to come down to? Yourself against Democrat Letitia James?
This race comes down to returning the office of the Attorney General to being a professional office focused on the public safety of New Yorkers. It shouldn't be about national politics. We shouldn't have an Attorney General who's distracted with partisan vendettas or a partisan ideological agenda. We need an Attorney General who's a real prosecutor, who's actually going to do the things it needs to make New York safer. When you look at the problems that New Yorkers are facing every day, I talked about transit crime this morning. We see these awful stories. I just got notification of another story today, someone assaulting people every day, this known repeat offender assaulting people every day, and nobody does anything about it. New Yorkers are frustrated with that. They're frustrated seeing that people get randomly punched, randomly stabbed, and nothing gets done. The thing is, we know how to prosecute crime in New York. We know how to do it lawfully and ethically and with compassion. That is what I did for 12 years. The problem is we don't have law enforcement leaders in the AG's office and the DAs in New York City willing to do the job. And that's what this comes down to. Do you want to be a politician who spends all day yelling at national leaders? If so, you know what? Run for Congress or go on CNN and be an analyst. I will actually do the job of Attorney General, prosecute crime, reduce crime, homelessness, and fraud, and make New York safer.
So, and folks, we are chatting live right now to the Republican candidate for Attorney General in New York State, Saritha Komatireddy, and her pedigree. I mean, it is the real deal. As I said a minute ago, this is not just token opposition. And I'm going to be starting with your telephone calls in just a second. So you graduated from Harvard College and Harvard Law School, and you began your legal career as a clerk for then Judge Brett Kavanaugh on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. Is that correct?
That's right.
What was it like working for Judge Kavanaugh, who's now in the Supreme Court? And do you feel that he received a raw deal?
You know, Justice Kavanaugh is he is the hardest working person I know. He cares very deeply about doing the right thing and getting the law right. And that was my experience working with him. You know, I remember the first case I worked with on him was a case where we went through more than 100 drafts of the opinion. And that was not unusual. He thought about the law carefully. He thought about the facts carefully. And even more than that, he thought about how the law impacts everyday people and their everyday lives. It's not just theory or academics. It's about making sure that things are fair and just in people's everyday lives. And those are lessons I take with me in my practice. You know, as a prosecutor, I interacted with people from all walks of life. It's one of the real privileges of being a prosecutor. You're not just hanging out with your own friends in your own circles. You're meeting people from every part of New York. You're meeting victims. You're meeting witnesses. You're meeting the criminal defendants themselves, and you get to know these folks. And you understand human nature better, and you understand what motivates people better. And that's part of the reason I say all the time, we know how to fix this problem. We don't have to live this way in New York. It's really simple. I've sat across the table from hundreds of criminals. And sure, some do suffer from mental illness, but most are regular people. They're like you and me. They're making a calculation, a risk versus reward. And in New York, in the last 5 years, that calculation has gotten completely out of whack because there's really no consequences for committing crime. If we have a real prosecutor as Attorney General, make sure there's consequences for committing crime, then that calculation gets reset and we can go back to law and order in New York.
I have to tell you, looking at your credentials, it kind of slapped me in my face because I expected at best token opposition from state Republicans up against Letitia James. Your credentials, I mean, they couldn't have made you up like in a movie in terms of the credentials that you bring for this job. And so what I want to do, and I'm going to get to specifically because it sounds like you want the office to focus more on crime than what Letitia James does right now. But I want to mix this up with the public. And so I'm going to bring in some of the telephone calls for you. And let me just say this, folks, please ask your question of the candidate. If you start with speeches, I'll be forced to cut you off. Let's begin with Jay, line 5, New Jersey. Jay, what's on your mind?
Yeah. Hey, Dominic, thanks for taking my call. My question to the candidate is just that, you know, I understand the fighting crime, and that's very important. But at the same time, I think that what Letitia James did has to be punished. And my question is, will anything be done to, you know, take action and punish those who did those things so those actions are not repeated by future tyrants?
I really appreciate your question. Listen, what Letitia James did was absolutely wrong. It was absolutely wrong. You don't target people because you disagree with him. You don't target people because of their politics. And I can tell you, As a prosecutor, I have never prosecuted anyone because of their political views or their political associations. So I can commit to you that I would never do that, and I never have. I agree with you. Letitia James needs to be held accountable, and I think she can be held accountable and should be held accountable at the ballot box. We should not tolerate that kind of attorney general in New York, and we need to send that message. We need to send that message as New Yorkers. We need to send that message as lawyers in a legal profession. We need to bring professionalism back to the Attorney General's office. That means enforcing the law without regard to race, religion, or politics.
And thank you for that response. Folks, we're chatting live with the Republican candidate for New York Attorney General going up against Letitia James. This is a race that will be national. The entire country will be watching. And her name is Saritha Komatireddy. Serious credentials. Let's go to Peter, line 4, Long Island. What's your question for the candidate, Peter?
Hey, Sarita, I was wondering about endorsements. Most importantly, is Debbie Lovato, has she endorsed you? She's the...
Okay. You know, why don't you crawl back? I apologize for that, Madam Candidate. Why don't you crawl back in your mommy's lap and let her go feed you some cookies and give you some milk and do what you do, you nut job. So I'll ask you this, candidate, before we get to the first break here. So you want the office to focus more on, and we see other calls coming in. You know what? Let me just go to the next one. Demetra, line 2 in Queens. Go right ahead, please.
Yes, hello. How are you? I'm so glad that you took my call. I want to call to say that I've been listening, and I would like to volunteer to help this candidate. I live in Queens. I'm a New York City person, and she sounds like she's an amazing candidate. I like what she's saying and what she's doing.
Okay,
Hello?
So you want to volunteer. So if for folks that want to help you, how can they find out more?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. That's really kind of you. You can go to my website, Saritha, Saritha, for New York, all spelled out, .com. There's a form there if you'd like to volunteer, sign up. And that's the best way. That's the best way to sign up. And so I really appreciate the support. And Dominic, I'm not sure what the previous question was asking about, but I will just say I have received the endorsement of the last Republican Attorney General of New York, Dennis Vacco. He's the last person who was a federal prosecutor who became Attorney General. And I'll tell you why I received his endorsement. He wrote a letter, a lengthy letter explaining that New York now is exactly like it was when he ran and won. It is a place where people are concerned about crime and where a place that needs a prosecutor in charge who's focused on reducing crime. And he believes I can win. He believes I'm that prosecutor that is qualified to take over the office and fix it. And that's why he endorsed me. I've also received the endorsements of Mike Lawler and others. I received endorsement of former Congressman John Faso. I received the endorsements of people who have been victims in my cases, NHL players, Michael Pekka and Brian Berard. And I will tell you, the second week of my campaign, when I launched, I even had a former criminal defendant that I prosecuted reach out through an intermediary and say, listen, New York will be safer if you're in that office. I hope you win. So if folks are asking about endorsements, I've certainly been endorsed.
Well, I've got to take a break, and I'm going to come back and go back to more calls for you. We've got to have you back because we have a lot of calls, and I just don't have enough time to ask you all the questions. But I can just tell you this. I've been around for a long time, and I remember when Dennis was elected, Dennis Vacco, the Attorney General. And if I'm the Letitia James campaign, I'm honestly saying, right about now. It is time for a break. We are coming right back. And we are talking live to the Republican candidate for Attorney General in New York State. Her name, Saritha Komatireddy. And you know, I only have like less than 4 minutes, and you have completely lit up every line on the phone board. So I have to say now that we want to have you back in the future where I have time to go more in detail with the issues. But reading over your credentials, I could not believe what I was looking at this morning, right? So after 9/11, you go to law school. Then you're a prosecutor in the Eastern District of New York, and you spent a decade prosecuting leaders in Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Mexican drug cartels, on and on and on. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. You know, listen, it was a real honor for me to be a part of those cases and to lead those cases. I will never forget, there was a day in 2017, I was supposed to give an opening statement actually on September 11th, and out of respect for the day, we moved the start of the trial to September 12th. But that was the opening statement in a case of an al-Qaeda bomb maker who tried to wipe out a U.S. military base in Afghanistan. Luckily, the military was able to stop that bomb from going off. And when they took it apart and unwrapped the brown packing tape around that bomb, they found fingerprints. And those were the fingerprints of the man that I prosecuted in federal court in Brooklyn. And along with a team of my colleagues, we convicted him. The jury came back with a verdict of guilty beyond a reasonable doubt on all counts. And that is exactly the kind of case that I had hoped to do as a public service to my country after 9/11. And it was an honor to do that. You know, in the process of becoming a federal prosecutor and doing those cases, I learned a lot about the threats facing this country, not just from al-Qaeda, but also from the drug cartels, the international drug cartels that introduced fentanyl into the illicit drug supply here in the country, and it has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans over the years. I prosecuted cybercrime, which is another crime that people are experiencing, large and small. People are getting hacked into, they're getting scammed, they're getting false text messages that lure them into giving out money or their credit card numbers. These are the things that are actually affecting people every day. They're feeling it every day. They're losing money. They're feeling like there's no law and order anymore, and no one's doing anything about it. And these are exactly the kinds of things that an attorney general who's focused on crime in New York and not distracted by national politics can do something about.
You know, I apologize to our audience. Again, you've lit up every single line, but I've got 20 seconds into a national break that I've got to toss to. What will a debate between you and Letitia James look like? We only have 15 seconds here.
It will be a comparison of our records. Listen, you look at the 7 years that Letitia James has been in office. Look at the state's own data from since 2019. Crime is up 26%. Drug deaths are up 63%.
And I have to step in. Thank you so much. I want you back very, very soon.
I'll be back anytime, Dominic.
This is Roger Stone with a serious warning for you. The U.S. dollar has lost 97% of its purchasing power since 1912. Your savings are exposed, and gold and silver remain the final hedge against currency devaluation, inflation, and ongoing economic uncertainty worldwide. So call 844-272-2428 now to get your free gold and silver guide from American Sovereign Bullion and learn how to protect your wealth with gold and silver. Call 844-272-2428 or visit dyingdollar.com. That's dyingdollar.com.